If every bit of feedback feels like an attack, this is for you. Because if you don't fix this, one Slack message can ruin your night and your reputation. Today I'll give you one line and a simple rule that change how you handle criticism. The part that will surprise you is where we slow down your reactions without turning you into a doormat. If that sounds like something you need, stay with me. You're at your desk, half watching a progress bar crawl across your screen when a Slack notification pops up from your manager. You click it without thinking. We need to talk about your last client call. The way you handled their pushback made us look unprepared. Your stomach drops. You feel your jaw tighten, your chest get hot. You start replaying the conversation in your head and, within seconds, you're not reading the words on the screen anymore, you're hearing, "You're not good enough at your job." Your fingers hover over the keyboard, ready to fire back a long, defensive message you'll definitely regret. Here's the harsh truth: feedback itself is not the problem. Your relationship with feedback is. You've been treating every comment like it's a verdict on your character instead of information about your behavior. That's why you keep getting hooked. That's why a simple Slack message can ruin your whole day, your evening, and sometimes even your sleep. You know the pattern. You get an email or a comment in a meeting that doesn't land right. Instead of listening, your mind immediately starts building a case: all the times you did it right, all the details they missed, all the reasons they don't see the whole picture. You feel misunderstood, attacked, singled out. You start over-explaining, arguing, or shutting down. Later, you replay the conversation in the shower, in the car, lying in bed. It costs you to focus at work because you're stuck in your head. It strains relationships because you carry that anger home. And slowly, it chips away at your confidence because you start to believe that you can't handle criticism without falling apart. If nothing changes, every new role, every promotion, every serious relationship just brings more and more situations where feedback feels like being punched in the same bruise. Today, we're going to build something different. By the end of this lesson, you'll have a simple script you can use to listen first instead of jumping into defense mode. You'll have a mental filter that helps you separate useful signals from noisy projections so you're not swallowing every critical comment whole. And you'll have a 24-hour response rule that keeps you from firing off emotional replies that feel good in the moment but quietly sabotage your reputation over time. Educational content inspired by classical Stoic texts. Not medical, psychological, or legal advice. First, we're going to look at why your brain treats feedback like a threat, and how to detach your worth from the words you hear. Next, we'll build a listen-first routine you can follow in any conversation, at work, with a partner, or with a friend, so you stay grounded while the other person talks. Then, we'll create a simple filter to scan any piece of feedback for signal versus noise, so you stop over-investing in comments that don't deserve your energy. After that, we'll install a 24-hour response rule that protects you from reactive replies in email, text, and Slack. Finally, we'll walk through a realistic evening scenario where all of this comes together and you see yourself staying calm under criticism in real time, instead of exploding or shutting down. In a bit, we'll walk through a Friday night situation where one message could have wrecked your whole weekend, but this framework helps you keep your cool and protect a relationship that actually matters to you. Stay with me until the very end, and while you're here, hit like, tap subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Not because of some algorithm, but because this is one of those skills that quietly changes the way you move through work, money conversations, and every serious relationship you care about. The first big idea is simple but not easy: feedback is about what you did, not about who you are. When you mix those two together, any suggestion feels like an attack on your identity. When you separate them, criticism becomes data. If you never make this shift, every performance review, every tough conversation with a partner, and even small comments from friends will keep triggering the same spiral of shame and anger. Here's why this matters so much. Your nervous system is wired to treat threats seriously. When someone criticizes you, especially someone whose opinion you value, your brain doesn't see useful information. It sees danger. It lumps negative feedback in with social rejection, and social rejection used to mean physical danger. So your body does what it's designed to do: it floods you with energy to fight, flee, or freeze. That's why you talk faster, your heart pounds, and you struggle to listen. As Marcus in his Meditations basically points out, other people's judgments are less powerful than your own interpretation of them. The interpretation you've been running is "I'm being attacked." We're going to upgrade that to "I'm being given information about my behavior." One line helps you snap into that frame before you react. The next time feedback hits you and your chest gets tight, say silently to yourself if you're in a meeting, "This is about actions, not my worth." If you're speaking out loud, you can say, "Okay, I hear that. Help me understand which specific behavior you're talking about." Both versions are simple, but they shift you from "I'm under attack" to "we're looking at an event." That small mental move gives you breathing room. Picture this: you're on a Zoom call with your manager and a senior colleague. You've just finished presenting an update on your project. There were a few moments where you stumbled over the numbers, but overall you think it went okay. Then your manager says, "Honestly, your presentation felt all over the place. I'm not sure you were fully prepared." You feel that heat rise in your face instantly. Old you want to jump in with, "All over the place?" I stayed up half the night to fix this deck, or to shut down and give one-word answers for the rest of the call. Instead, you feel the hit, and in your head you repeat, "This is about actions, not my worth." Out loud, you say, "Okay, I appreciate the feedback. Can you point to one or two moments that felt disorganized so I can see what you mean?" Now the conversation shifts. They say, "Sure, when you went back to slide 3 after slide 6, and when you didn't have the exact figures for Q2. That still stings, but now you're looking at specific behaviors. You can fix "have exact figures for Q2 ready." You can fix "don't bounce backward in the deck." You're not sitting with a vague feeling of being a failure. Your tiny action for today is this: write down that one line, "This is about actions, not my worth," and put it where you'll see it, on a sticky note near your monitor, as your phone lock screen, or as the title of a note in your Notes app. The next time someone gives you feedback, your whole job is not to be perfect. Your job is to remember that line once before you respond. We'll layer more tools on top of it, but this is your foundation. The second idea is a practical rule: in the first minute of receiving feedback, your job is to listen, not to explain. You don't have to agree, you don't have to like it, but you do have to stay quiet long enough to fully hear it. If you skip this step and jump straight into defending yourself, the other person feels dismissed, you miss important details, and the conflict usually escalates instead of resolving. Here's why a listen first rule works. When someone gives you feedback, they're usually carrying some emotion too: frustration, worry, disappointment, sometimes fear. If you immediately argue, their nervous system feels attacked and they double down, pushing harder or becoming more passive aggressive. When you stay in listening mode for a short, defined window, you interrupt that escalation. You show, through your behavior, "I'm taking this in." That lowers their emotional temperature slightly and gives your own system time to cool down. This is how a calmer, more focused version of you responds instead of reacting. You can turn this into a microscript that you use almost anywhere. When feedback comes in, you say, "Got it, I want to make sure I understand. Can you walk me through what you saw from your side?" Or, in text or email, "Thanks for flagging this. Let me read through what you've written and then I'll respond with a plan." These sentences do three things at once: they acknowledge the other person, they buy you time, and they keep you in listening mode. Imagine you're at a team meeting in a downtown office. You've just wrapped up presenting a new idea for improving your onboarding process. You're proud of it. Then a coworker says, "Honestly, this feels half-baked. I'm not sure you thought through the impact on support." The room gets quiet, and you feel everyone's eyes on you. Old you wants to snap back, "Half-baked? Did you even look at the last 2 slides?" Another version of you wants to mumble, "Okay, whatever," and mentally leave the room. Instead, you take a breath and say, "Okay, I want to make sure I understand your concern. Can you walk me through what you're seeing from the support side?" The coworker explains specific worries: increased ticket volume, confusion for new hires. As they talk, you realize there are indeed gaps you didn't consider. By the end of the exchange, you're able to say, "Thanks, that's helpful. Let me refine this with your points in mind and we can revisit on Thursday." You've stayed calm, shown maturity, and actually improved your idea. Your tiny action for today: decide on your listen first sentence and write it down. It might be, got it, I want to understand your perspective, or, thanks for the feedback, let me sit with it. The next time criticism hits you, your only job is to say that line once before you say anything else. Hold on to this, because when we get to that Friday night story later, that one sentence will be the difference between a fight and a calm conversation. The third idea is to build a simple filter. Not all feedback deserves the same weight. You need a way to sort comments into signal you act on and noise you release. If you treat every offhand remark like a command from the universe, you'll stay exhausted, constantly adjusting yourself to please whoever spoke last. This matters because, in real life, people bring their own mood, stress, and biases into every comment. Your manager might be under pressure from their boss. Your partner might be tired from a long day. Your friend might project their own insecurities onto you. If you never filter, you carry all of that as if it's objective truth. That builds resentment, confusion, and decision fatigue. Over time, you can lose sight of your own standards because you're busy chasing everyone else's. A simple way to filter is to ask 3 quiet questions when you receive feedback. Is this about a specific behavior I can see? Does it connect to a real impact that matters? Is it coming from someone whose perspective I value on this topic? If you get at least 2 yes answers, it's probably a signal. If you get mostly no's, it's likely noise, or at least low priority. As Seneca often reminds his friend in his letters, you don't have to adopt every opinion you encounter, you get to choose what you let shape you. Here's a microscript you can use with yourself. Take the part that's useful, leave the rest. Out loud, if someone is being a bit harsh but you see some truth, you might say, I see the point about specific behavior. I'll work on that. The rest doesn't fully land for me, but I appreciate you sharing. You're signaling that you're open but not a doormat. Picture this, you're in a shared apartment kitchen in Toronto, making coffee before your remote workday. Your roommate walks in, opens the fridge, and sighs loudly. You never clean up your side. It's disgusting. You look over. There are 2 containers and a half-used bag of salad on your shelf. That doesn't exactly scream disgusting, but you can tell they're clearly annoyed. You would either explode seriously? Look at your leftovers from 3 weeks ago. Or swallow the entire comment and think, wow, I'm a disgusting person. Instead, you silently run your filter. Is this about a specific behavior? Sort of. Is there real impact? Shared space, mild. Do you value their perspective on cleanliness? To a point. You decide it's a partial signal. You respond with, okay, I'll wipe down my shelf later today. If there's something specific that's bothering you beyond that, let me know. You've taken the useful part, clean the shelf, without accepting the full you never exaggeration as your identity. Your tiny action, think about one piece of feedback that's still echoing in your head from the last month. Maybe from a manager, a partner, a parent. Write it down in 1 sentence. Then, right underneath, answer your 3 questions honestly. Circle the part that's the actual signal. Decide on one small behavior you'll adjust based on that signal, and consciously release the rest. You don't have to carry every word someone throws at you. The 4th idea is the 24-hour response rule for emotionally loaded feedback. Whenever a message hits you hard, an email, a Slack DM, a long text, your default rule becomes, you don't send your real response until you've waited, at minimum, until the next day. If you ignore this and reply in the moment, you're letting your most triggered, least thoughtful self speak for you. This works because emotions feel permanent when they're peaking, but they're actually waves. The intensity rises, crests, then falls. If you respond at the top of the wave, your words are soaked in adrenaline. You'll say things you don't fully mean, or you'll overpromise, or you'll apologize for things you're not actually okay with. Give yourself a sleep cycle, and everything looks different. Problems are still there, but you're seeing them with a clearer mind. This is how a more grounded version of you protects your future self from cleaning up unnecessary messes. Here's the microscript. When you get a heavy message, you reply with, thanks for sharing this. I want to give it the attention it deserves. I'll think it through and respond tomorrow. That's it. That one message buys you the space you need without ghosting or stonewalling. If it's truly urgent, they can say so and you can adjust, but most things can wait a day. Imagine you're finishing your workday in a small apartment in Chicago. It's 6:30 p.m., you're tired, hungry, and scrolling through your phone on the couch. A long text comes in from your partner. I feel like you never really listen when I talk about my day, and when I bring up serious stuff, you joke or change the subject. It makes me feel like you don't care at all. That last line hits you like a truck. Your first reaction is, "Are you kidding me? I do so much for us." Old you starts typing, a long, point-by-point defense, dragging in old arguments and receipts. You can practically feel the fight starting. Then you remember your rule. You take a breath and type, "I'm glad you told me this. It's a lot to take in and I don't want to respond on autopilot. I'm going to sit with what you've said and I'll text or call you tomorrow when I've had time to think." You put the phone down. The urge to keep typing is strong, but you've just protected both of you from a late-night blow-up. Your tiny action is clear: choose one channel, email, Slack, or text, where you'll apply the 24-hour rule this week. Decide now, if a message in this channel makes my heart rate spike, I will not send my real response until at least tomorrow. You can still send the holding line we talked about. That's the only exception. We'll stress test this in that Friday night scene later, when a single message could flip your whole weekend. The fifth idea is to separate content from tone when you're being criticized. If you blur them together, you'll reject valuable information just because it was delivered clumsily or harshly. If you can split them apart, you can say, "The way you said that was not okay, but there's a point in there I can use." This matters because not everyone has good communication skills. People under stress get blunt, sarcastic, or careless. If you insist that helpful feedback must always be wrapped in perfect phrasing, you'll miss chances to grow. On the other hand, if you accept any tone just to get the content, you'll train people to speak to you disrespectfully. You need a middle path, firm about tone, open to content. Here's why this approach works. Your brain often latches on to the most emotionally charged element, usually the tone, and ignores the rest. By consciously naming tone, not okay, content, may be useful, you stop the two from fusing into one big "I reject everything" reaction. It's like adjusting two separate sliders instead of one master volume. You can turn down how much you tolerate the tone while still turning up your willingness to examine the content. A microscript you can use in real time is, "I'm open to hearing this, but the way it's being said is making it harder for me to take in. Can we slow down and focus on the specific issue?" Or, if you need to hit pause, "I want to talk about this, but that tone doesn't work for me. Let's take a break and come back to it." Imagine you're standing in the back room of a retail store in Vancouver. You're a shift supervisor and you misread the schedule, leaving the front understaffed for an hour during a busy window. The store manager storms in and says, "What the hell were you thinking? This is basic stuff. Do you even care about this job?" The words sting. Old you want to either snap, "If you scheduled properly, we wouldn't have this issue," or shut down for the rest of your shift. Instead, you take a breath and run the split in your mind: tone, harsh. Content, "I did mess up the schedule." You say, "I see that I messed up the schedule and it impacted the front. I'm willing to fix that and make sure it doesn't happen again. But talking to me like I don't care about my job makes it harder for me to stay focused on solving it." The manager grumbles, but you've put a line in the sand while still owning your mistake. Your tiny action: think of one recent piece of feedback that came in a tone you didn't like. In a note on your phone, write 2 short lines, tone and content, fill each line with one honest sentence. Then ask yourself, what's one thing I can adjust based on the content, regardless of the tone? That's your move. You're starting to train your mind to separate the useful from the messy delivery. The sixth idea is to treat critics as temporary collaborators instead of permanent enemies. Not everyone who criticizes you is for you, but in the moment of feedback, you can still use their perspective like a tool. If you automatically label them as against you, you'll resist anything they say and miss angles you wouldn't see on your own. This matters because some of your most useful feedback will come from people you don't like, or people who don't like you. That coworker who always seems to find flaws in your work? Sometimes they're nitpicking. Sometimes they're pointing out a real risk you missed. If you can see them as a temporary co-designer of the solution, even for 5 minutes, you reduce the ego battle and increase your chances of walking away with something valuable. This works because it shifts your identity in the moment. Instead of "I'm the defendant and they're the prosecutor," you move into "we're both looking at this problem from different angles." That mental reframe changes the questions you ask, the energy in your voice, and the way the other person responds. You're no longer trying to win, you're trying to understand and improve. A simple microscript here is, okay, let's look at this together. If you were in my position, what would you change first? Another version, assuming we're on the same side of getting this right, what's the biggest risk you see? You're inviting them into problem-solving mode, which can pull them out of pure criticism mode. Imagine you're working in a small tech startup in Austin. You've just shipped a feature, and the senior engineer who always seems skeptical says in a Slack channel, "This UI is confusing. It's going to frustrate users." You roll your eyes. Old you thinks, "Here we go again," and starts crafting a sarcastic response. Instead, you DM them, "Hey, I saw your comment about the UI. Let's look at it together for a second. If you were in my position and had to improve it by tomorrow, what would you change first?" They reply, a bit surprised, and jump on a quick call. They point out that the submit button is below the fold on smaller screens and that the error messages are vague. They're still a bit blunt, but you now have 2 very specific improvements you can make in under a day. You ship the changes, help users, and quietly build a reputation as someone who can work with tough feedback. Your tiny action today: identify one person whose feedback you tend to reject on site. It could be a coworker, a relative, or even a manager. The next time they criticize something you did, your experiment is to ask them one co-designer question instead of getting defensive. Something like, "If you were redoing this from scratch, what's the first thing you'd adjust?" You don't have to agree with everything they say. You're just practicing shifting them, in your own mind, from opponent to temporary collaborator. The 7th idea is about boundaries. You can be open to feedback and still refuse disrespect. If you never set this line, people who are hurtful or abusive will use "I'm just being honest" as a cover for cruelty, and you'll start confusing being tough with tolerating harm. This matters because your nervous system can only handle so much. If you repeatedly expose yourself to harsh, shaming, or degrading comments in the name of growth, you're not practicing Stoic strength, you're eroding your sense of safety. A key part of emotional control is choosing which environments you will engage with and which ones you'll step out of. You're not obligated to stay in every conversation. Here's why boundaries actually support better feedback. When people know you won't tolerate certain lines being crossed, the ones who respect you will adjust how they speak. The ones who don't respect you will get frustrated or leave, which gives you information about who they really are. Like Epictetus taught his students, you can't control others, but you can control what you accept and how you respond. A microscript you can use when a line is crossed is, "I'm open to talking about what's not working, but I won't stay in a conversation where I'm being insulted." If we can keep it focused on specific behaviors, I'm here. If not, I'm going to step away. If you're on text or DM, you can write, "I hear that you're upset. I'm willing to discuss the issue, but not while I'm being called names. Let's revisit this when we can both speak respectfully." Imagine you're at a family dinner in a suburban home outside Boston. You mention that you're considering changing careers, maybe going back to school or trying a different field. A relative who's had opinions about your life for years says, "You're so flaky. You never stick to anything. No wonder you're still where you are." The whole table goes quiet. Old you would either crack a joke to deflect or sit there shrinking into yourself, replaying those words for months. This time, you take a breath and say, "I'm okay with hearing concerns about my choices. I'm not okay with being called flaky like that. If you want to talk about specific worries, we can. If not, I'm going to change the subject." You've just done something powerful. You didn't explode, you didn't shrink, and you made your boundaries visible. Your tiny action: decide on one sentence that marks your line when someone talks to you in a way that crosses your values. Maybe it's, "That way of speaking to me is not okay," or, "I'm going to pause this conversation until we can both be respectful." Practice saying it out loud once when you're alone. You're not waiting for the perfect moment, you're rehearsing so that when the moment comes, your body already knows the words. The eighth idea is to build a simple, repeatable feedback review ritual for yourself. Instead of letting comments swirl around your head randomly, you'll have a regular time when you sit down, look at recent feedback, and decide what to do with it. If you skip this, you'll either obsess over criticism or avoid thinking about it entirely, reacting on instinct instead of making intentional adjustments. This matters because change doesn't happen in the meeting, in the call, or in the text thread. Change happens afterward, when you're calm enough to see patterns. A quick ritual, even 10 to 15 minutes once or twice a week, makes sure you're not just surviving feedback but actually using it. It turns criticism into a kind of personal lab report you review and act on. Here's why this is powerful. When you write down feedback and your responses to it, you create distance between you and the comments. You can see themes: people keep saying I'm rushed in meetings, or I get defensive when money comes up. You also see progress, situations where you stayed calm that would have wrecked you last year. You move from I'm bad at handling criticism to I'm working on these specific skills. Your microscript for this ritual is more of a prompt you use with yourself. What did I hear this week, and what's one thing I want to test based on it? Once a week, that's the question you answer in a short note. You're not writing an essay. You're just logging signals and experiments. Imagine a Thursday night in a small apartment in Denver. You're at your kitchen table with a glass of water and your laptop. You open a note titled Feedback Lab. You scroll back through the week, a comment from your manager about your emails being too long, a friend saying you've been hard to reach, your partner mentioning that you check your phone during conversations. A month ago, each of these would have felt like separate attacks. Now, you list them out. You notice a pattern: when you're overwhelmed, you write long messages, go quiet socially, and half listen at home. That's one theme: overload. You type, this week's signal: I get scattered when I'm stretched too thin. One experiment: for the next 3 workdays, I'll keep my emails under 5 sentences and put my phone in another room during one conversation a day. You've turned a swirl of criticism into one focused experiment. Your tiny action: pick a time in your week, maybe Sunday evening or Wednesday night, when you can spend 10 minutes on this. Create a note called Feedback Lab or whatever name feels less intense. This week, log just 2 pieces of feedback you've received, good or bad. For each one, write one line, what it was, and one small behavior you could test because of it. That's it. You're building a habit that makes feedback less scary and more useful. It's a Friday night. You're driving home from a long week, city lights sliding past your car windows. The sun's down, the sky's a dark blue, and you're thinking about nothing in particular, maybe what you'll order for dinner, maybe the show you'll watch to shut your brain off. Your phone buzzes in the cup holder at a red light. You glance down and see the name of your manager. Instantly, your shoulders tense. At the next red light, you pick up the phone and read the message. It's a long Slack DM forwarded to your email: we need to talk about your performance on the client account. I've gotten feedback that you come across as disorganized and defensive when clients push back. We'll discuss Monday, but I need you to take this seriously. Your heart rate jumps. The old version of you would already be spiraling. Disorganized? Defensive? Seriously? The ride home would become a loop of arguments you'll never say out loud and imagine conversations where you quit dramatically. By the time you walk through your front door, you'd be so weird that a small comment from your partner, "Did you forget to grab milk?" could trigger a fight. Tonight, something different happens. You feel the hit, because you're still human. Your chest tightens, your mind races. But before you react, the line from earlier surfaces: this is about actions, not my worth. You repeat it quietly in the car. You remind yourself that this message is data about how you showed up on that account, not a final judgment on your value as a person. The wave of panic doesn't disappear, but it softens by a few degrees. You pull into your parking spot and sit for a moment. The urge to fire off a long email is strong. You catch yourself unlocking your phone, your fingers hovering over the reply button. Then the 24-hour rule you've been practicing comes online. You exhale and type instead: thanks for letting me know. I hear that this is serious. I'm going to reflect on the feedback over the weekend so I can come to our Monday conversation with a clear plan. You hit send, put the phone face down, and step out of the car. You've just changed the entire tone of Monday's meeting in 2 sentences. Upstairs, your partner is on the couch, scrolling through a food delivery app. You kick off your shoes, still feeling that residual buzz from the message. They look up and say, "Hey. Everything okay?" You look tense. Old you would say, "I'm fine," in a clipped tone, or launch into a fast, defensive rant about your manager not understanding you. Instead, you remember your listen first habit. You say, "Yeah, I got a heavy message from my manager about work. I'm still processing it. Can I tell you about it and just have you listen for a minute?" They nod. You talk through what the message said. As you hear yourself describe it out loud, you notice what you didn't see in the car. The feedback mentions disorganized and defensive without specific examples. You catch that. You also remember your co-designer move. You say, "If you were my manager hearing that I seemed disorganized and defensive to a client, what's the first thing you'd want me to work on?" Your partner thinks for a second and says, "Honestly? I'd want to see that you're prepared with your facts and that you're open to questions instead of shutting them down. Maybe you could ask for specific examples on Monday so you know what to fix." The room feels calmer already. You're not spinning in "I'm terrible at my job." You're focusing on "be prepared, stay open, and ask for examples." Over dinner, you both talk about Monday. You decide on a plan. You'll go into the meeting, listen first, and use your script. "Thanks for the feedback. Can you walk me through a couple of specific moments where I came across that way so I can understand what happened?" You'll separate tone from content. If your manager is blunt, you'll mentally label it without letting it derail you. After dinner, you spend 20 minutes in your feedback lab note, jotting down what you already know you can adjust, preparing clearer structures for client calls, pausing before responding when clients push back, and asking one clarifying question instead of instantly defending your idea. On Monday morning, you walk into the meeting room. Your manager starts talking, a little faster than usual. The client felt like you weren't really hearing them. When they asked about timeline changes, you went straight into why it wasn't possible instead of asking what they needed. You feel that familiar flash of defensiveness, but you hold on to your listen first rule. You say, "Got it, I want to make sure I understand. Can you walk me through what they said and what you observed?" Your manager lays out 2 specific moments. As they talk, you see it. You did jump straight to explaining. You did sound rushed. When they're finished, you respond calmly, "Thanks for sharing that. I can see how that would land badly. I'll adjust by taking a breath, asking one clarifying question before I respond, and confirming I've heard their concern before I talk about constraints. If you're open to it, I'd like to run my plan by you before the next call." Your manager relaxes a little. The conversation shifts from "you're the problem" to "here's how we improve this." You leave with clear, actionable steps instead of a cloud of shame. That Friday night message could have been the start of a lost weekend, a ruined mood, and a tense Monday. Instead, you used the tools, separating worth from actions, the 24-hour rule, listen first, content versus tone, and treating your manager as a temporary collaborator in solving a shared problem. You didn't suppress your emotions, you steered them. By Sunday night, you slept better because you had a plan, not just a problem. At its core, this lesson is about moving from reacting to responding when you're under criticism. It's about seeing feedback not as a verdict on who you are, but as information about what you did and what you can do next. The difference between mindless and intentional in this area shows up everywhere, in how you show up at work, how you handle tension with people you love, and how you talk to yourself after a mistake. We started by zooming in on that moment when a message or comment lands and your chest tightens. Instead of letting that moment own you, you learn to say, "This is about actions, not my worth," and to notice the cost of staying stuck in the old pattern: lost sleep, strained relationships, a reputation for defensiveness. From there, we built a listen-first habit so that, in the first minute of feedback, your job is not to argue but to truly hear what's being said. Then we added a signal versus noise filter so you're not treating every opinion as law, you're asking whether it's specific, impactful, and coming from someone whose view matters on that topic. After that, we installed a 24-hour response rule for emotionally loaded messages, so you stop letting your most triggered self speak for your future. You practice sending a simple holding line that buys you time without ghosting. We then separated content from tone, so you can reject disrespect while still extracting useful information. You saw how you can say the way you're speaking isn't okay and still own your part in what went wrong. Next, you reframed critics as temporary collaborators, at least long enough to ask them what they'd change first if they were in your position. That shift moved you from courtroom energy to co-design energy. We also built a feedback review ritual, a feedback lab, so comments don't just swirl around in your head. You learn to log what you've heard, spot patterns, and design small experiments to test adjustments. Finally, you walk through a Friday night scenario where all of this came together: the sting of a critical message, the choice to wait 24 hours, the decision to listen first on Monday, and the way those actions turned a potential disaster into a manageable problem with a clear plan. Now it's time to bring this into your real life with 3 do-today steps. First, write down the line, "This is about actions, not my worth," somewhere you'll see it during your workday, and commit to repeating it once the next time someone criticizes you. Second, choose one channel, email, Slack, or text, where you'll apply the 24-hour rule to any message that spikes your heart rate, and prepare your holding sentence: "Thanks for sharing this. I want to give it the attention it deserves. I'll think it through and respond tomorrow." Third, open a simple note titled Feedback Lab and log just 2 pieces of feedback you've received in the last week, along with one small behavior you'll test based on each. Those 3 actions are small, clear, and fully in your control. If this resonated with you, the next natural step is to go deeper into how you talk to yourself after mistakes. You'll want to watch the lesson on building a Stoic self-review ritual, where we break down how to evaluate your own day without either beating yourself up or letting yourself off the hook too easily. Think of it as the companion to this episode: external feedback meets internal reflection. If you feel messages like this need to reach more people, subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next lesson. Every time you choose to respond instead of react, you're not just becoming better at feedback. You're becoming the person who can stay calm under criticism, protect what matters, and keep moving forward with your focus intact.